You're listening to Edging the Truth.
Welcome to another episode of Edging the Truth. This is episode 21. Our topic for today is not really a conspiracy theory, but it is a topic that is back in the pop culture landscape, zeitgeist, whatever words you like to use. We're talking vampires. Are you guys into scary stuff? Brian, you like scary movies?
I mean, I'm not. I used to love scary movies and like horror stuff when I was a kid. And I love Halloween Horror Nights and like those kind of things, like live horror stuff. But even then, I don't know. Once I got to like a certain age and like realized it was like props,
Yeah.
It's like, oh, like whatever. Because it's just, and even when I go to like those things anymore, I'm the guy that's like where they pop out of you at the maze. And besides like a little jump scare every now and then, be like, oh, damn. I'll get all close to him and be like, that makeup looks fucking great, bro.
Yeah.
I'm there looking to like, look at this how good the 3D is. I'm that guy. I'm not really into that. But I mean, vampire, I'm going to disagree with you. I think vampires is very much a conspiracy theory because a lot of people believe vampires exist. I mean,
well, that is true.
A lot. And I mean, I knew we're coming right out of the gate hot. I've dated a lot of vampire chicks. I mean, this vampire and goth, bro. Yeah, I've dated girls that have drank blood before and that wanted me to drink blood. And I was like, nah.
Well, we always say a conspiracy theory has to have, a conspiracy. It has to have a group of people behind it, keeping it on the down low, keeping it hidden. So it very well could be.
There's nothing download and hidden about this, though. But I mean, they'd be downloaded and hidden if they were real vampires, just like the mole people. So I'm very much not a big horror person, but vampires also not believing they exist.
What about you, Fudge? Are you a scary movie guy? Do you like reading Stephen King?
I mean, Stephen King's cool. I'm not a big scary movie person. I think I would just go. I would go see the scary movie if there's in high school, whatever. If there's a group and there were a bunch of chicks going, then I'd go. But I don't really go out of my way to watch scary movies. I like watching ghost stuff, like people trying to capture ghosts on camera and shit like that, because that gives me goosebumps, makes my hair raise up a little bit. So I like it if it's there's some aspect of it being kind of real, I guess, because kind of what Brian was saying, with the props and everything just being super gory, and I don't know. It's not horror's not really my thing. We'll just say that.
Yeah. No, I don't. One lung. Where are you at with scary movies? I
love it.
Yeah, I was gonna say there's a part of me that feels like you're into the scares.
Me and my sister always we're always watching scary movies. Our genre for scary movies though are typically more the paranormal activity type movies, the demons, the spirits, that kind of stuff. So I've never actually really seen a scary movie that is vampire related. I've never been scared of any vampire movie out there. But vampires are fun to me. I grew up watching vampire movies and shows, and I learned at a young age what a vampire was, and I've fallen in love with different series that vampires have. But I don't think they exist in real life. But I love the idea of vampire, and especially where it's gone in media and pop culture. It's so much fun, and we'll talk about some of the different movies and stuff today. But I just think that the idea that people are out there lurking in the shadows, attacking humans and everything, is not realistic for me.
Yeah, well, the reason we're talking vampires today is that there's movies now about vampires back in the present. The Jamie Foxx movie Day Shift just came out, a week and a half ago. There's another movie coming out this Thursday called The Invitation that's kind of a modern retelling of the original Dracula story. It seems like there's waves of vampires that come around every 5, 6, 7 years. We had the whole Underworld series. We had the whole Twilight series, right? The True Bloods. These are just in the last 20 years, right?
Well, do you know why?
Oh, we're going to be talking about the why. Well, don't get ahead of me. You see our plan. So the real question is, when did you become aware of vampires? What was it Dracula? Was it, for me, and I'll start. For me, it was going to the zoo. We have a great zoo here in Seattle where I live, the Woodland Park Zoo, and they have a section that's called the Nocturnal exhibit. I think it's actually long gone, sad to say. But when I was a kid, you'd go to the zoo and they'd take you through this, and it was pitch black, red lights, and there's a little booth, and there's vampire bats in there. And real vampire bats, and you're like, as a little kid, you're like, what's the story there? Those are vampire bats. They'll suck your blood, blah, 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 blah. So for me, vampires were always connected to a real thing that does drink your blood, supposedly. And then, of course, seeing Dracula and going, oh, those things go together? That there is some grounding in this. What about you, Fudge? What was your first vampire experience?
Dude,
was it a movie, a book?
The Count on Sesame Street.
The Count on Sesame Street. There you
go.
go.
That was the early one, I guess. Yeah, I wasn't even thinking about
It's got to
that
be everyone's, right?
That's mine too. Yeah, that's what I was saying.
If I think, like, obviously Dracula is probably the most famous one, or Count Chocula if you're into that kind of cereal or something like that. But honestly, like, and it probably is the Count on Sesame Street, and it's not like he was super like vampire-y,
non-threatening.
Like non-threatening, not really what we're used to seeing like in the common folklore stories, or dating back to the 1700s, and even some more modern retellings of things and more modern vampire stories. But yeah, Sesame Street, shout out.
Hell yeah. What about you, Lung? I mean, I know for me there was there's always a Dracula adaptation that keeps coming out every so often. In the 70s, it was the Frank Langella version, and then it was the Gary Oldman version, and there's dozens and dozens of others. Were any of those something that hit you at an early age?
So actually for me, first off, Andy's right. My first experience was the Count, but the first time that I really remember like knowing what a vampire did was Buffy the Vampire Slayer. My parents would watch it when I was a kid, like right before bed, like it was on WB at like 8 o'clock or whatever, and we'd watch that. And then there's a spinoff of that show, Angel, and that's the first time I really knew kind of like what vampires were, and saw like how they died and all their little rules and stuff, and stuff like that. And I love that in different movies, like they've added different rules to vampires here and taken things away here and whatnot. But it's definitely, I think definitely Buffy was like the first time I really like understood what a vampire was. And then I learned about Dracula and all the stories about Dracula and stuff like that.
When you also get vampire hunting, which also is like a whole other universe of things, the people that are into that sort of aspect of it is real interesting to me. We're using an image of kind of a vampire hunter's kit for the cover image of the episode, because it is like, I think the way a lot of people think of it, like, oh, I'm not into the vampire part, but I do believe they're out there, and I'm gonna go find them, and I'm gonna go put stakes through their hearts.
And also through that series, you learn that there's good vampires and bad vampires, and it's like, okay, that's interesting,
Yeah, they're always portrayed a certain way. Generally. What about you, Brian? Obviously those other the Count Choculas and the Sesame Street. That's our first. Obviously, we all encounter Dracula that way. We don't think of him as a vampire. We don't think of him as scary. What was your first scary vampire?
And that was the whole thing. I was like, because I was thinking like, what was my real first like exposure where I consciously remember about vampires? And it's like, yes, did we eat Count Chocula? Yes, but I didn't think like, oh, he's gonna suck my blood with cereal, or even the Count. It never registered to me that the first time I really like feel like I knew that vampires were vampires and what that was. I mean, I'm sure we read Dracula in like middle school and stuff like that. I feel like that was a signed reading, but like the Castlevania, the NES. Like that was my first real like exposure that I can think of to vampires, where it was like vampires and vampire hunters. It was a twofer because you had to have the hunter to hunt the vampire. That was the whole shtick. I mean, you can't have one without the other in all of these stories. And that was my thing. I mean, I put a lot of hours into that first Castlevania. I mean, you had vampires, you had the Frankensteins, you had like everything in there. I mean, that was true vampire hunting. Frankly, I was more into the vampire hunting than I was into the vampires. So, but that's because when we thought about this show, that was the first thing I went back to, was like, what was my true first memorable, where I knew a vampire was a vampire experience. And like I gotta say, even if I read Dracula earlier, it was that NES, original Castlevania.
Yeah, I think it's funny. I was just thinking too that at the time in the late I was born in '73, so in the late '70s, early '80s, the Tomb of Dracula was still a known comic book by Marvel and a character that they used, and so you saw Dracula on the cover of comic books, even though it was scary, even though it was it was still Dracula. It was a little less threatening because it was in a comic book, and so I very vividly remember kind of that transition from the Count of Sesame Street, the very non-threatening kind of vampire, to the comic book version, to seeing posters. A Mad Magazine made fun of that '78 Dracula movie, and I remember seeing that, and then a book. We used to have book fairs. You still have book fairs in elementary schools where they bring in boxes of books, and so I got a copy. I got a copy of Dracula, and I still have it, and it's still the copy of Dracula in print that I have. And boy, you read that, and it's, especially if you're young, like 10, or it's dry. It's dry as fuck. It's like reading someone's journal entries, and then it switches to, sort of love letters, and you're like, okay, yeah, this is not what I was hoping for. Well, again, as we started kind of going down this path, and I was thinking to myself, why are we into vampires, right? And where does it kind of start in America? I think most of us think of Dracula as being the beginning of the vampire craze, right? Like that. I know that Bela Lugosi version from whatever 1931 is still iconic. It still shows up around Halloween. And if it's on, you're like, oh yeah, check this out, and his great accent and all those things. But what I found out is that in America anyway, it all kind of comes back to the turn of the century, into the 20th century. There's a famous painting by this painter Philip Burne-Jones, and he made this painting of a vampire. It's called Just the Vampire. 1897 is when this painting came out. We'll put it up here on the screen so you can see it. It's of a female vampire attacking a man.
Hell yeah.
Which I think is so interesting compared to the way we think of Dracula, where it's always a man dominating a woman. This painting, which then inspired a poem by the great Rudyard Kipling, probably best known for The Jungle Book, also happened in the same year. And those two things inspired what would become the first vampire movie in America, called The Vampire, in 1913. So we're looking at roughly like 100 years plus, in a decade or so, of vampires in pop culture, and in at least in the film world, right? Like, this is just in film. I think it's fascinating that we keep coming back to these tropes of vampires in America, that they exist somewhere, whether it's Blade, whether it's Underworld, whether it's Twilight, whether it's, you name it. There's dozens and dozens. There's a Wikipedia page on vampire movies about vampires. I stopped counting at 200. There are hundreds of vampire movies. There's the Hammer horror movies. There's the Universal ones, right? I feel like you can't go a decade without there being vampires in pop culture. So let's just really quickly talk, what's your favorite depiction of vampires in pop culture? If it goes all the way back 100 years, are you a diehard? You know what? In my brain, when I think of vampires, I still picture Bela Lugosi saying "Children of the Night," or is it more like what we see in modern constructs, where there's this mythology between werewolves and vampires, or vampires and fairies, or vampires and whatever else? Which one seems like the way you think of it? Let's start with One Lung.
I think for me, just because what was that?
I was gonna say, if I say vampires in America, what do you picture in your brain?
I think for me, it's True Blood. I think that when I watched that, because such a long series for me, and like the story was so good up until, and then people may disagree with me. The last season or two was not the greatest, but the first part was just fantastic, and I think that the story itself was good. And like whenever I think of vampires, even today, I think of True Blood, and I think of the way that that whole series was done. It made sense from a a story standpoint, and so I definitely think that it's True Blood. Even though, as Josh says, it's trashy, it's good trash, man. It's so good, so good.
Yeah, those were fun. And let's also not forget one of the great things about True Blood too is that it was based on books.
Yeah.
An author is much like Dracula. An author, someone who's good at writing and storytelling, set all that up. And if you haven't ever had a chance to read the True Blood books, check one out. They're really well written and fun reads. What about you, Fudge? What vampire stories are you gonna bring your little ones up on?
Obviously, Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter, which I can't believe.
Yes,
nobody's brought
thank
up
you
yet.
for mentioning that one.
Especially being an Illinois boy, and I've been to the Abraham Lincoln Museum in Springfield multiple times. Shout out. No, so my girlfriend Kaylin is, well, I don't know, but I guess I can still say is, but anyway, was growing up a Twilight girl. Huge Twilight fan. I saw Josh bring it up in the chat. I'm also Team Jacob. He is so much hotter than Edward. It's not even funny.
Me too.
But I think, Red, you're kind of talking about, what to me, like, what does a vampire look like? And I think that's interesting because, like, back in the day, like, when they first came around, back in Europe and in England or in the Baltic areas or what have you, the vampires were described as kind of bloated and dark because they had just been drinking a lot of blood. Whereas today, like modern times, they're usually, pretty skinny, sleek, pale, almost like they're tried to be portrayed in more of a sexual way, I guess, more persuasive. So I guess that's how I identify the vampires a little bit more, obviously, because I am the young one on the podcast. So that's really all I know is kind of the more modern stuff. But I guess what I'm going to bring my kids up on is some fucking Twilight. So
there you go.
Yeah,
Sparkly vampires.
Yeah.
Well, I live in Twilight Land. Forks, Washington is not far from where I'm at. So, man, when those kids get to be of age, you got to make a trip out here and visit
Absolutely.
Twilightville.
Yeah, the house is actually right here in Portland.
Yep. There's a
Cohen
lot
house.
of locations from Twilight you can come check out around here.
And off of the Twilight thing, real quick, the baseball scene in that movie still smacks. I love the baseball scene.
This guy, he's about that
There's
vampire baseball life.
There's a clip. Somebody mark that down, please.
Dude, well, the music that goes with that scene is fantastic.
I am one.
He loves the baseball. He loves the music. He can't get enough.
I'm probably committing blasphemy here, but I have never seen or read any of Twilight.
Movie
I don't blame-
night!
For the best. It's for the best.
I think it's. I'm with you, Brian. Brian, what about
you're
you?
fine.
You and I are closer in age.
You
What
guys
do
are too old. You guys are too old to be watching Twilight. You don't
That's
need
what
to
I-
even dip your toe into it.
Thank
You're
you very
a
much.
normal
Thank
adult.
you. I
And-
just got to
and,
get out of jail free card.
Yeah, once again, I will say, like, when you date girls that are into that stuff, like that, and all they talk about is that shit, you just, like, I am not into. That's her thing. That was what she did. I listened to that so I could have sex with that, and then, we move it along. But it's, yeah, I mean, it's just but it's like if you go back even. So let me go back to like movie, all that kind of stuff. What's my favorite depiction of vampires? Like, I didn't really watch even True Blood either. Maybe a couple episodes. I wasn't really into that show either. I mean, I've
Never
always been
watched
a vampire killer or vampire monsters thing. But then, all of my vampire stuff, just video games. Like, it's all video games for me. I mean, Legacy of Kain, that was a great vampire video game back in the day, and that was the first one I think where I remember where I was the vampire and had to suck people's blood, and I enjoyed that aspect of it too. But I mean, I love vampire video games. I mean, there's been quite a few of them with varying results. I mean, some of the Blood Rains were good. God, there was a lot of decent ones. That Legacy of Kain was a whole series. But I mean, it's like it just really depends on the age you grew up in, because it's like, I mean, like what I think of the realest depiction of a vampire I've ever seen in was Preacher. Did you guys see that Preacher in the comic
Preacher
book
was
or the
so
show?
good.
I mean, like that's, I feel like, was like real. And you always notice that it's always unique for them to be in America. Like that we just established that it's an old country thing, that if they had to be from over there, you know, not a lot of Native American vampires. But also Bram Stoker's Dracula. It was stuff like that with the big butt head. Remember the fucking Bram Stoker's? Like it was like all those stuff where it was
Gary
like
Oldman one.
And an Interview with the Vampire with the Brad Pitts. Yep. I mean, that's I guess the 90s generation vampires, and that's a totally different thing where there was the violence and stuff. But now I feel like the modern vampire stuff is just like, you know, once we went from Blade Beyond, it was like violence, blood. You know, that's what we were kind of going for anymore. And it's just, I don't know, it just depends on your thing. But then the sparkly vampires are violence and blood mixed with whatever. And especially if you see those movies, which, you know, like I said, they are on TNT. Sometimes you're stuck in a hotel. I've, you know, seen them shits, and like, but the thing that always got me is that they rip people's heads off. No blood, nothing, just clean head rips, because I got to maintain that PG-13. And it's just weird. And the whole end where it was like all a vision and they didn't actually fight each other. Fuck that shit. All right. And the werewolf, she should have banged the werewolf. I don't even, so much wrong with that. So much wrong. But I mean, on the flip side, I enjoy the idea of vampire, because hey, your boy wouldn't mind being an immortal being. You know what I'm saying? Like, just, you know, live through many a generation. But
yeah, not have to eat.
Yeah, Brian,
Are
you
you
look
sure
like
you can
you'd
handle
enjoy
that,
blood.
Brian? Never eating food ever again?
I mean, you just have to have the people you eat that food, and then you're like, oh yeah, I can taste that.
We're talking movies. We should probably do a little bit. We all three of us have watched The Day Shift. I think we should give quick thoughts on that. Being, you know, we're talking modern vampires. This is a telling of a pretty modern telling of a vampire story. So, Red, you start. You and I kind of talked about it before.
Yeah.
We started the live stream. Then Brian shit on it as soon as we hit the live button on.
It's true. I mean, so one of the reasons we're talking about vampires at all is because of this movie. And Brian, I forgot that you mentioned Interview with a Vampire. They just remade Interview with a Vampire, and that is now a TV series that I think is either coming out in the very short future or is already out. So yeah, we watched Day Shift, this new Jamie Foxx movie with Dave Franco, and it's fun. It starts out and just gets you right in it. There's not a lot of world building, and then they kind of give you some backstory and kind of fill in the universe of stuff. We were talking about how the fact that it's directed by a former stunt coordinator on the John Wick movies, which was in turn, John Wick was directed by the stunt coordinator from the Matrix movie. So like this is very much a kind of in line with that style of action movie. Lots of real fast action and lots of practical stuff, lots of wire work. And it's fast. The fights with the vampires are fast. The vampires are ferocious and full of energy and all that sort of thing, which, again, I've always liked that take on monsters. The 28 Days Later movies flipped the script on zombies in that way. Zombies were always this lumbering, slow thing, and then 28 Days Later came out, and now they're just like... They're like rabid chimpanzees. They're just fast. And that's how when you watch Day Shift, you're like, oh, this is full of action. It's still a silly, fun movie. There's lots of plot holes and things missing. It's very clearly meant to set up a sequel, I thought. What do you think, Fudge? I mean, I think we both like this movie to a certain degree. It's a great Saturday afternoon movie, but would you go see it in the theater? I don't know.
I don't know if I'm gonna go out of my way to see this one. This was definitely like I had some time this afternoon. I was just hanging out with my daughter, and I was like, perfect movie to throw on for a 3-month-old and me to watch. She was asleep, but I was like, I better do some research for the podcast tonight. and I thought that this was the easiest possible way I could do some research for the podcast tonight, was watching this movie. And I think you're right. It's a fun watch. I don't think it's a great movie. I thought Dave Franco had some great moments. I thought him and Jamie Foxx did pretty well together. Snoop Dogg is in it. Anytime you tell me Snoop Dogg's attached to almost anything, I'm in. He's a black cowboy. He drives a Ram truck, which, of course, come hit me up if you want one of them. I got 2021s for $2,500 under sticker. Anyway.
Yeah. We need a graphic for your car dealership.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sure they'd love to be associated with us. Bleep it out. Bleep it out. Anyway, Jamie Foxx is a vampire hunter that was associated with, like, there's apparently a vampire hunters union. And he does some stuff. He breaks some violations. He gets kicked out. Snoop Dogg's character, Big J, helps him get back in. He gets Dave Franco assigned to him as his union rep. He's divorced from his wife. He's got a daughter. His wife says they're going to move to Florida if he doesn't make like 10 G's in like a week. So he goes after these vampire fangs. Because basically you kill the vampire, take their fangs, you bring them to the union, they give you that cold, hard kiss-ash. Brian was talking earlier how he didn't realize how they were worth money. I don't know the scale of what's more expensive.
Wait, I got points to make.
It sounds like...
We don't need to make points about this movie.
No, he's going to go on some long fucking trope.
Oh, no, I'll keep it short and sweet.
We got 2 more topics to get to.
Right, so I'll close this up. Anyway, like the elder teeth, so the older vampires, I guess the older the vampire, the more expensive the more the fangs are worth. Yes. Fun movie, like Red was saying, a lot of good fight scenes. There definitely some plot holes. I think this is a good movie to maybe, eat some edibles, get a little bit stoned on a Sunday or Saturday afternoon when you got nothing to do, and give it a watch. I think, it's one of those Netflix movies that is... They produce a lot of movies that are just kind of okay. I don't think this movie is just okay. I think it's a little better than... It's just fun. I'll just say it's fun. It's a cool depiction of vampires. They're definitely setting it up for a sequel. And anytime you can end with Snoop Dogg throwing the double birds and going West Side, I'm in. I'll watch it. I don't care. I don't care.
Okay, Brian, you get 1 minute to talk shit about this movie. 1 minute.
Basically, I'm with Fudge, though. I will watch it. I was already on board with Jamie Foxx, but then Snoop Dogg, I will watch anything with... I watch Soul Plane. I watch anything with Snoop Dogg. Yep. You know what I'm saying? Like, I will watch the Snoop just to watch the Snoop a loop. Like, that's my guy. But, like, the main villain into this, her whole gist was she was into real estate and sunscreen. That was her whole character in-depth thing. And none of it paid off. Like, now there's, it's just, and then he killed her daughter. Why was her daughter older? Why didn't she stay a young vampire? The 5 different versions of vampire that they spent way too long explaining to us.
You didn't realize why the daughter was older. Because so she got bit, she had to come to America, she left her daughter behind. She was gone for so long, her daughter wasn't like a vampire yet. She got old. Then she was finally able to go back, and that's when she bit her. She was already an old lady.
I see. All right,
they were making the sunscreen because vampires can't be in the sun. I know. Obviously.
That doesn't make it a good plot point. All right.
It's true. It's true. It's absolutely true.
Her character depth was real estate and sunscreen, and mad that this guy killed her daughter. That was also the whole character arc for that villain.
Brian, I have one more thing I want to throw in. Because I'm sure you noticed this. So like they break in to the vampire place where they're making the sunscreen, and then there's like magically just a bunch of guns and like the bullets that are specifically made to kill the vampires. Yeah. Why is that in the fucking lab where they're making the sunscreen? Wooden bullets with the silver tips. Like, why is that there?
Yes. Like I'm gonna manufacture the thing that can kill me. And just make it readily available for anybody that happens to walk through the door to kill us with it.
Fully handy. Like, hey, your clip's out. Look at those right there.
Yeah, let's just fill it with these. These look good.
Oh, good thing you brought the gun that these fit for. That's so good for you. Like,
yes. Well,
but I mean, it's, It was an entertaining movie. Frankly, I've seen a lot worse be put out. Like I would,
Yeah.
you know, is it if it came on like on TNT at 3 in the afternoon, I would watch it. Yeah, like I said, Jamie Foxx was Jamie Foxx, Snoop was Snoop. Is the whole thing, or is there some weird vampire economy where some rich people are getting their kicks off paying for old teeth? I don't understand it. Maybe it's the Catholic Church. They got a lot of money. They seem like they would try to wipe out vampires.
Oh yeah.
Nevertheless, I guess we'll find that out in episode 2, Vampire Boogaloo. But until then, but there was one I totally forgot about until I just want to throw this out, you know, unrelated to all the topics. Dusk Till Dawn.
Oh, the great vampire movie.
Great, just vampire.
The first one
is
one of the best ever. Yeah.
I mean, that was the first time we saw vampire and vampire titties. Win. And Quentin Tarantino dies, and that makes all of us happy.
Salma Hayek in that movie is amazing.
Yes, go watch the Jamie Foxx movie. Don't believe it.
What about has anybody seen What We Do in the Shadows on FX?
Oh yeah,
Yes,
once
it's
again,
great.
that's great
It's
vampire.
great. And let's not forget there was Dark Shadows, like all through the 70s, which they made a movie of. I mean, there's Count Gorgo. There's so many offshoots of course, let's not forget there was Blackula, you know.
But that's the same. If you talk to somebody else from the next generation, that we talk to some 50-year-old guy, 60-year-old guy, what you say, what's your vampire? That's
Exactly.
their cultural, whatever they grew up with, that hole, that's what it was filled with, was that vampire.
Well,
so these new kids, you say something about Dark Shadow to anybody right now, they'd be like, what's that?
Yeah, exactly.
That means
Exactly. Unless
nothing
they're
to them.
Johnny Depp fans and they are really into Tim Burton and saw that movie.
Well, that's if they were going to goth and if they shop at Hot Topic, odds are.
Well, and that is sort of the next sort of bridge, and I want to, I want to kind of throw this sort of to both Brian and One Lung as we move into sort of a little bit more of the realities of vampire and vampirism and what that might look like. Brian, you said you dated some chicks that drank blood.
Of course you
One
did.
Lung and I were talking about the other night about the fact that they're, right now in the news, it's been reported multiple times that Megan Fox and Machine Gun Kelly are drinking each other's blood. By the way,
That's a good eye roll, Fudge.
Full disclosure, if you type in "is it safe to drink blood?" into Google, the answer you will get is drinking animal or human blood can have severe health risks, including the risk of contracting a blood-borne illness. Medical professionals do not recommend this practice. Okay, so now that we are no longer liable, do not do this, people. Please do not do this. And yet the realities are there are tons of people that do this. I found an article from 2015 on the BBC about groups of thousands of people that share in blood drinking things that feel a lot like those opium den scenes from old movies. A bunch of people laying around hooked up to IVs of each other's blood. Quotes of things like, "Oh, my the person drinking me didn't think I was metallic enough," and blah blah blah. And I'm like, okay, this is a very bizarre thing to me. I mean, I think we've all skinned our knees or cut ourselves and gone like that, or something like that to stop the bleeding, but I have never in my life thought about having a nice warm glass of someone else's blood. Why don't we maybe start with some One Lung on this? I know this was something you were a little more interested in terms of the angle, and as our resident medical expert,
He's interested in drinking blood.
No, definitely not interested in it. But I just thought it's like, is there any medical benefit to drinking blood? And so I went off on a little excursion to see what I could find, and like Red said, there's immediately they're like, don't do this. There's bloodborne pathogens that can be very hurtful to you, but also just in the base of it, you have a lot of iron in your blood, right? And so the more blood you drink, the more iron you can get, and if you get too much iron in your body, you can die from that. I mean, and so really, it's just not a good idea to drink blood. However, Red, you did mention people being hooked up to IVs of blood, which is different than drinking blood, because that's a blood transfusion, which actually can be very beneficial in a lot of medical situations. So, and I wouldn't consider that to be vampiric at all. But you hit the nail on the head. There are a lot of religions around the world and groups that believe in drinking animal blood and human blood. And, like you said, here at this podcast, we do not recommend it. We go with Google and we say it is very dangerous. Don't try it. But there are people that are doing it, and I would just like to say I don't think it's good. I don't think it's good at all.
Please don't. Please don't. I remember seeing the second Indiana Jones movie, Temple of Doom, where they force him to drink the blood out of the skull thing, right? At least that's what I always thought it was. They were forcing him to drink blood. It was the whatever that eventually turned him, right? They force him to drink some whatever it is, but that was always one of the things where I thought, oh, there's blood drinking that doesn't really have to do with vampires or any of that kind of business. But I've always only ever seen it in the connection of vampires. Brian, please enlighten us into somebody's practice of this.
Oh man. So basically, in all the situations with the multiple girls I dated who were into the whole vampire and blood thing, it was either animal blood that they would drink, which, animal blood is used for cooking and all that stuff. And if you can get it fresh, yes. And their own blood, because that was also readily available.
Mm-hmm.
And they always want you to drink their blood. And I was like, I'm good. I'm okay on that. But and the animal blood too. I'm not a big animal blood fan. I don't like blood sausage. I don't like the animal bloods. But I mean, and man, every time a chick drinks blood, she wants to kiss you after. Every single time. No, that was like a thing. I know it's like, I don't know what is this whole, there's this weird thing with blood and like sex and blood and stuff. And it's just like, no, I'm not. I mean, that's I say I haven't put a towel down in my day. That's a different kind of blood. Okay. But it's just like, but it's, you get what I'm saying. It's just, but even like when I was in high school, like to just kind of flip it to a little different direction to get back to the medical side, like there was a lot of stuff going around with this thing called, it was blood stacking, where you would like donate your own blood and then they would put that shit back into you. So your body had more blood than it should. So you could carry more oxygen. It was like athletes did it and that kind of stuff. I don't know if that was ever really like a condoned medical thing or whatever, but it's like, that's definitely, one of those aspects of blood where people were take it out and put it back in, but it was still their own blood, and in transfusion, you have to have compatible blood. So I definitely don't think you should be drinking or ingesting other people's blood that is definitely not your blood type. And you can get blood poisoning from that kind of shit. That is a horrible way to die. But vampire chicks, man. Yeah, a lot of that. Usually the chicks that drink blood are also the cutters too. So that's a whole other subset.
It's funny, man. That's exactly what I was going to mention. Like, for me, I don't remember like so much of people ever doing the drinking thing, but I do remember like the like goth folks being into cutting also.
Goth folks.
Like, cause that was like, I was in high school from 1988 to 92. So like that was kind of right at this beginning of those kinds of things, and so you didn't really see it. You definitely saw, the goth movement starting to happen, but it didn't ever seem to be associated with the vampire stuff. It wasn't. It was, it was a reflection of what people were seeing in music videos, because that was still a thing, But I find it interesting too that as time has moved on, and as it's become bigger in popular culture, obviously things like Twilight, where vampires just look like regular teenagers, right? There's not a lot of manifestations and things that make it look too obvious, as opposed to, Blade with his armor and sword, and or Underworld with this skin tight latex cat suits and things like that, right? Like normal people can be vampires. True Blood was also, I think, like that. It was just, you could be a normal person. Mm-hmm. We had a wonderful addition to our list of things. For those of you that don't maybe follow the podcast on the regular, we have a fabulous Discord, and we will make sure that you can see the link on the screen for that, but I believe it's discord.io/edgingthetruth, and one of our listeners posted an interesting story about vampires that I want to kind of bring into our next area of conversation, and that's these sort of vampire cults. The story that our friend Corey posted took place in Orlando, and it was, basically a guy and some girls and some, they had a vampire cult where they were drinking each other's blood, and it was some, maybe a little harmless for a while, and then it ends in some murders. I feel like this is where we hear about vampires in America happening more often than not. It's in relationship to something really weird and creepy and scary in somebody's behavior. Every so often you'll see a mugshot of somebody who's very clearly trying to pass themselves off as Dracula, or something to that effect. Did any of you get a chance to see or read Corey's post about that in the Orlando Sentinel?
Yeah. Also, I'm just gonna say, is any of us surprised that this happened in Florida? Anybody?
Nope.
Well, I mean, why
not at all.
vampires in Florida? Like, that doesn't make sense. If you're not into the sun, Florida is not the place to live in America.
But there's lots of old people you can kill and nobody would miss them. I'm just saying.
Okay, well, I like that. See, now that's what I always loved about the 30. What was it called? 30 days. Oh, what's that movie called? Where they're stuck in Alaska and it's the vampires descend on the town. 30. Shoot, I can't remember the name.
28 Days Later? Was that?
No.
That
It's
series?
called.
Was that vampires?
No, that's
That was
28
zombies.
Days Later is 30 Days of Night is what it's called, and it's based on a comic book. It's Josh Hartnett and who else is in it? Anyway, it's like thank you, 30 Days of Night. It is correct. It takes place in Barrow, Alaska, a place where at a certain time of the year there are 30 straight days of nighttime because that's just how it is. And of course, it's prime hunting season for vampires, and that's the premise of the first movie. I think there's even a sequel, and it's not very good, but I love that idea that there are places in America where vampires can thrive. But let's get back to the cults aspect of this. Is this just another thing for teenagers to lock onto and have an excuse to hang out together and do silly weird things or blah 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 blah? Or do we really believe that there are actual vampires? I'm pretty sure none of us think there's anybody called vampires out there.
I mean, I'm sure that those fucking stupid teenagers believe they were vampires. That doesn't mean they actually are. Like, you can dress in all black and wear fucking black nail polish and have black hair, but that doesn't mean you're actually a fucking vampire. That means you're a goth kid who hates the world and thinks everybody hates you, when that's not actually the case. You're probably in the fucking marching band or drama or something stupid. Okay, those programs are not stupid.
I did those things, Fudge.
But I'm saying that is where you usually find the weirdos, okay? Yes. In a high school. I'm going to get some flack for that. I don't think those programs are stupid. They produce a lot of very smart, intelligent, and talented people all over the country. But I'm just saying there are also a couple outliers, all right? That think they're fucking vampires and weirdos. But yes, this article that Zanoni sent us was very just weird. So this guy that dropped out of high school, there's how you know he's a fucking winner, decided that he's a vampire and he's immortal. More people that are fucking weirdos to come with him down to Florida to meet this chick that he had met the year before in high school, and he ends up killing her parents. So you really fucked up story. I don't know. They would drink each other's blood. They were a vampire cult. They believed they were all, vampires and shit. I don't know. I just don't get it. I don't get it.
No, I mean, I think it's just. I think the underlying thing is, especially when you're at those ages, you just want a place to belong. Yeah. And sometimes you may not believe in all that same shit or whatever, but hey, like, I get to hang out with these people and not be alone and whatever. And hey, I'll take the vampire cult over the kid that goes crazy and starts looking up gun stuff. You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
Like, I'll take the vampire cult every day.
Well,
And there are weirdos everywhere. I mean, it's not just those departments. There was plenty of
Oh,
weirdos.
I know.
And all this stuff.
I
just
that's not what I was trying
different
to
weirdos.
say, but yeah,
Mhm.
it was.
Different weirdos.
I was
Well-
talking more from personal experience.
You had a lot of problem with the drama kids at your school? I guess.
No, I didn't. Most of them were just fucking weird. Like but there are weirdos in every department. There are weirdos that are athletes. There are weirdos that don't do any of that kind of stuff.
Yep.
It's
going.
literally everywhere. It's not just those. I'm talking from personal experience when I'm thinking about my high school, who I could think would be doing shit like this.
Here's the thing that we have here. We have a very great podcast, right? With two of us that were athletes and two of us that were drama musical people. And I'm just gonna say there are just as many assholes in the athlete world.
I didn't say there weren't.
I heard you. Only
And
the
I did all of
musical
those
drama
things,
kids
so
are
I did
gonna be
all of those
vampires
things.
drinking
I
blood.
also was an athlete too, but
I did
just
all
a
those
little-
things. Yeah, see, I did all those
Just
things.
a
You were an
little
athlete
bitty
too
sack.
long.
I
You
did
told us
both
you were an
things.
athlete. You told
Jesus.
us you used to
Well,
run.
don't ever come for One Lung's musicals, or he just goes into full attack mode. Listen, I will tell you, there are plenty of dudes that I fucking ran cross country and track with that I fully would believe that they were also fucking vampires. Okay, it is not
Cross-country for
mutually.
sure.
It's not mutually fucking exclusive to those two departments. I was drawing those as a personal experience to my fucking high school, as that group is who I could see pulling that off. I apologize if I offended anyone, especially people on this podcast. One Lung, how about you fucking live a little? We're talking about some fake ass shit. So just calm down.
Hashtag cancel fudge.
Yeah, dude, cancel me. Cancel me.
But you can't cancel these deals on these
I don't
rap
understand.
drums.
My favorite moment there was One Lung going, keep going.
Keep going. Hey, how about you keep going? Let's name more departments.
Well, I do think and in retrospect, if I had to close my eyes and picture what kids would be dressed up as goths, I can't imagine any of the kids that played football. I mean, I went to a very inner city high school. Like, there would not have been the football players go in that direction.
If any of us on this podcast were vampires, it would be One Lung. So I think that's why he's getting super fucking defensive about it.
Hold on.
Hot take.
Explain why it would be me.
Well, because you come off as like super nice and you're like the sweetest guy ever, and it's all just an act. You're just you're super shady. You're small. You can hide places and you can attack when people aren't looking. And they're not
extremely slow. Can't breathe. Can't really. There's no way I'm overpowering anybody.
Well,
all a
exactly.
ruse.
It's all a ruse, dude. It's either a fake, or how do we think like you're still going? It's because you're fucking sucking people's blood. You got, for all we're concerned, for all I'm concerned, you moved out of your parents' house. You have more room to keep like your victims in the basement or something in this new house that you're in. For like, who knows? Like, you could have somebody tied up down there, and that tube is actually, there's an extra one that goes to your mouth, and you're just sucking blood out of them. Like,
I mean, he's got an Igor in the house now too. Someone he's got an accomplice.
it's
Wow, a lot of pieces are falling into place.
shit's starting to add up here.
A
One
lot
Lung.
of pieces fall. Oh my god, I told you.
We got to keep the kayfabe going now.
Yeah.
I told you.
One Lung's a vampire. Brian can't get anybody's name right, and then we'll figure out the rest of the theories of the podcast.
Too good.
Yeah.
Well, I will close with this. My theory has always been that the invention of vampires has just been to explain people who like to stay up late at night. Like, I know I'm a night person. I'm a musician. Most of my day is, my work day is generally 6 p.m. to 2 a.m. Like, I live at night.
He's the vampire.
I've always felt like, those of you
you're
that have
pale
partied
enough
all
for it.
night and you went into some place to party and you came out and it was morning, you that's that vampire feeling, right? Like, oh, daylight is bad. Time to go find the dark again. I've always felt like vampires were just a great analogy for that. And
Zanoni, I did say that.
We all have spent some hours hanging late night and probably felt like vampires in the past, but I don't think any of us here think we're vampires. We're gonna settle on that. No vampires here. Drinking blood will not make us vampires.
I think One Lung is, but I don't think I am one.
Well, if I looked at the 4 pictures of us and say which one is a vampire, Red wins all the time. He's in the
that's
dark,
true.
He's
No,
like if like I said, you looked at these 4 and said pick the vampire here, I feel like that's Red.
Also, Andy,
true.
just to let you know, like when you get up early because you're ahead of time of us, who's the one that's still awake in the morning?
It is Red. It is
Yeah.
Red, and
Don't even sleep.
he fits the
Sleeps during the
profile.
day. Oh my God.
Pale. We saw him in Vegas in that black suit. Like, he can clean up, maybe the trombone. He just fucking chain smokes cigarettes and he dabs. He stays up till 5 a.m. drinking Red Bulls. I don't know. Maybe could be blood. I could see Red. I just like giving One Lung a hard time. Hold on. Second theory. Red is the vampire, and he's sucking the life out of One Lung. That's why One Lung is, needs the oxygen and all that shit. It's some fucked up Northwest bullshit they got going on.
I can believe
up
that
there.
too.
Yeah.
Like I said, I'm in Twilight Land. I mean, this is the place to do it.
They actually did tell us that to come visit their Twilight landmarks. Oh my God!
Yeah.
this is
Oh
all
my
making
holy
sense.
shit, dude. We just. This is a
I
Bigfoot
really
as
wish
an
I had
alien
some fucking
moment.
vampire fangs right now to just slide in.
You see Brian's comment?
I did like that.
Dave gives what are we doing this
Well,
show?
let me
I'm with
give
you.
Let me give you my close real quick here on this. Is 2 things. One, like because we were talking about vampire stuff last week. My fucking Instagram stories. I got a thing for these fucking fake vampire teeth, where you put them in your mouth and you push it with your tongue and it pops the teeth out and you can like retract them and stuff.
Oh, cool.
Like that's like the whole like new thing. But it's like my whole thing is the reason why vampires are so popular is the same reason. It's free. Anybody can make vampire stuff and not have to pay anybody. It's free stories. It's free stuff. It's why we have Grimm's fairy tales. It's why we have all this stuff. It's free. Nobody has to pay for it. That's why there's so much vampire stuff. And it's become so much more popular because, like so many of our conspiracies, because it's a modern thing. People like it. Like I said, it's 70s, 80s, 90s. People had some sort of vampire content they were consuming.
Mm-hmm.
That's why it's just become so much more normalized to us. And if somebody says vampire, I know what that is. Everybody knows what that is. You know what I'm saying? Like, of every age, there's not very many people that can be like, I don't know what a vampire is. Kids know what zombies are. It's just in the pop culture, and you just can't change that. But do they exist? No.
It's been in the pop culture since the fucking 1700. It's another one of these topics that we've talked about that goes back like farther than you'd really think. Like you go back to England and Germany, Russia, literally all over Europe. They had stories about vampires, and I thought it was interesting. It's like the different ways to kill them. It's like some of them, burn the bodies, or they would stake dead bodies with the wooden stakes, whether it was ash or oak or whatever. Silver was supposed to kill them. People wore the garlic necklaces and stuff like that, or they'd bury bodies with scythes and sharp objects. So if it did get bloated with the blood, it would pierce it and kill the undead. I don't know. It's I don't think they're real. I think it's just a really cool folklore story, but everybody loves a good vampire story. I think so. I think that's where it draws people in. I think a lot of people are crazy, and it's one of those where it's like it's out there, but it's not like so out there that you can't see it being like 100% true, if you know what I mean. Like I guess that's why it's conspiracy theory. So I guess that's why people can be convinced that they're vampires, and they'll drive fucking 12 hours to go kill somebody. But
well, and I also think people like the idea of a dead loved one being alive still, even as a vampire. You know, like, oh, but they're still there. They're still in there. You know, like that's my mom. She's still there.
Right, and that was kind of the origins of it. It was people, it was relatives and neighbors, people from the village that, you know, that died, and people report came back as they were undead and come to attack them or do whatever. But yeah, I think, you know, there's obviously Dracula in popular culture, and then there's like the original one. It's literally just called like the vampire, from way back, I think early 1800s, late 1700s, from John P. something. I don't know. He's an Italian immigrant. I remember that. But yeah, I'm out on vampires. I do not think they're real. I think it's a fun topic. I think they're going to keep making vampire hunter, vampire movies as long as they fucking can.
Yeah, and I was thinking earlier too, anime is full of vampires and vampire hunting. And another thought I just had, you know, you mentioned real quick, Brian, that the involvement of the church with vampires. You'd think that the church would want to deal with vampires. That was one of the bits in the Van Helsing movie with Hugh Jackman, is that he's ostensibly working for the church to kill vampires and other, demonic creatures. But also I remember Wes Craven's Dracula 2000 series set up the premise that Dracula was Judas, that his betrayal led to him becoming the first vampire, which I was like, oh, what a great take on it, and to tie it all together. One Lung, what you have any final thoughts as we wrap up our vampire discussion for today?
You know, I think that I agree with Andy almost on 100%. Like
that you're a vampire.
Except for that. But the only other thing I want to say is that with vampires being so widely known in our communities, that when they make these movies, they can save a lot of time because they don't have to explain what a vampire is. Yeah. So we get a lot of movies, and like Brian said, you don't have to pay for the idea behind it, like that. But also, a lot of these movies can get right into the meat of the movie. So,
yeah, when you go in and knowing it's a vampire movie, like, oh, we're going to see the vampire movie, you know what that you're going to get. They may have different rules in that vampire world, you know, where they show you, like, where they do the garlic and he takes a bite out of it. It's like, whatever, that doesn't do nothing, you know, but it's still, we understand what we're going to see. We're going to go see some blood-sucking things.
Yeah, whether or not, you know, like, and there's a lot of rules that the different movies, like, throw out there, like, you know, Twilight, they can go in the sun and it doesn't hurt them, they just sparkle. Some vampires, you have to invite them into your home. Some you don't have to. You know, there's a lot of different things that different movies play on, but the census around, like, what a vampire is still there. That construct is still there. That doesn't have to be taught. And I think we all learned at a really young age, for the most part, what a vampire does, even though we didn't know all the rules behind it, you know?
Yeah. I think that's why they keep selling, too, because, like you said, it's an easy sell. Well, hopefully this podcast has been an easy sell for you. I should think it was a fun afternoon. We have some stuff to tell you about how you can reach out to us. We have a voicemail line. We would love to hear from you. What did you think about the episode? Do you have some vampires in your life? Are you like Brian? Did you date somebody that's into this stuff? Give us a call. We'd love to hear from you. Our number is 917-979-6071. You can leave as long a message as you like. And we also have a fabulous shop. If you want to support this podcast, you can go to shop.edgingthetruth.com. We have shirts and hats and mouse pads and all kinds of other stuff.
So many cool things.
Lots of cool stuff. In fact, we would love to hear from you on our voicemail about what kind of merch you'd like to see. Do we need a vampire shirt? Do we need to have a shirt for every theme of episode that we do? We've made Ouija board shirts. We have one with Brian's famous concept of Bigfoot being an alien, which is one of my favorite designs in our shop. What do you want to see from us?
I want to see a drawing of One Lung as a vampire as a shirt.
I feel like we need a One Lung as a vampire shirt, or at least half the podcast is a vampire.
Yeah, or red and One Lung. You could pick between.
He's agreeing with the One Lung to throw us off the scent. He's like, they know too much.
Well, be sure to follow us everywhere you can. We are on Twitter. We are on Facebook. We are on YouTube. We are on Instagram. We are on Twitch, if that may be how you're seeing us now. If you follow us in all those places, Edging the Truth is our name there. And, of
TikTok.
course, edgingthetruth.com for everything that you could possibly need. Anybody else got anything they need to throw in there? Anything I forgot?
I will not be canceled.
Visit edgingthetruth.com for more information and links to all our social media and podcast directories.